Louis Armstrong wasn't dying, but he wasn't living either. In late October 1959, at Cedars of Lebanon Hospital in Los Angeles, Louis existed in a state that puzzled every doctor who examined him. His heart was strong, his lungs were clear, his blood work showed nothing unusual, but Louis Armstrong, the man who'd brought joy to millions, lay in a hospital bed completely unresponsive. He breathed, but didn't speak. His eyes opened, but didn't see. His hands moved, but didn't create. 20 doctors examined him. Cardiologists, neurologists, psychiatrists, specialists flew in from across the country. They ran every test known to medicine. They consulted textbooks. They held conferences. But nobody could explain what was wrong with Louis Armstrong, and nobody could bring him back. Lucille sat beside his bed every day. She held his hand, talked to him, played his records. But Louis remained somewhere else. Somewhere the doctors couldn't reach. Somewhere medicine couldn't touch. The hospital staff whispered. Nurses looked worried. Doctors spoke in hushed tones. Everyone felt it. Something was slipping away. Not Louis's body. His soul. Then, on the afternoon of November 3rd, a man walked into Cedars of Lebanon Hospital. Leather jacket, sunglasses, famous face. Dean Martin. He'd heard the news. Louis Armstrong was fading. And Dean Martin had come with something the doctors didn't have. Not medicine, not technology. Something simpler. Something powerful. Music. Before we continue with this incredible story, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. What you're about to discover is one of the most mysterious and beautiful moments in music history when friendship and song accomplished what 20 doctors could not. The information in this video is compiled from documented interviews, archival news, books, and historical reports. For narrative purposes, some parts are dramatized and may not represent 100% factual accuracy. We also use AI-assisted visuals and AI narration for cinematic reconstruction. The use of AI does not mean the story is fake. It is a storytelling tool. Our goal is to recreate the spirit of that era as faithfully as possible. Enjoy watching. To understand what happened in that Los Angeles hospital room in November 1959, we need to go back several weeks. We need to understand what Louis Armstrong had been experiencing in the months leading up to his mysterious collapse. Because what the doctors couldn't see, what the tests couldn't measure, was something only someone who knew Louis could recognize. October 5th, 1959, the Sands Hotel, Las Vegas. Louis Armstrong was in the middle of a 2-week residency, performing twice nightly. The crowds were massive. Every show sold out. People traveled from across the country just to see Satchmo, but something was wrong. Louis's band members noticed it first. During rehearsals, Louis seemed distant. He'd play his trumpet mechanically, hitting every note perfectly, but without his usual fire, without that spark that made people weep. After shows, instead of socializing backstage like he always did, Louis would go straight to his dressing room. Lock the door, sit alone in silence. His trumpet player, a young man named Eddie, knocked one evening after a performance. "Boss, you okay?" Louis opened the door, smiled. That famous Louis Armstrong smile. "I'm fine, Eddie, just tired." But Eddie knew better. Louis Armstrong was never just tired. Louis was always energetic, always laughing, always making others feel good. This quiet Louis was someone else. What nobody knew, what Louis hadn't told anyone, was that he'd been feeling strange for months. Not physically ill, emotionally empty. For the first time in his 58 years, Louis Armstrong felt disconnected from music. He'd wake up in the morning and not want to pick up his trumpet. He'd go on stage and feel like an imposter, playing notes but feeling nothing. Louis didn't understand what was happening to him. He loved music. Music had saved his life as a child in New Orleans. Music had lifted him from poverty. Music had been his constant companion through every triumph and tragedy. But now, in October 1959, music felt like work, an obligation, a burden. And Louis felt guilty about these feelings. How could he, Louis Armstrong, feel this way about music? What was wrong with him? During his Las Vegas residency, Louis began experiencing physical symptoms, headaches, dizziness, a tightness in his chest that wasn't related to his heart. His appetite disappeared. He'd sit in restaurants with Lucille, staring at food he couldn't eat. Lucille grew increasingly worried. "Louis, baby, something's wrong. Let's see a doctor." But Louis refused. "It's nothing. Just stress. I'll be fine after Vegas. Except he wasn't fine. October 20th, 1959, Lewis's final performance at the Sands. The show went beautifully. Standing ovation, encores, people crying in their seats. From the outside, Louis Armstrong was at the peak of his powers, but inside, Louis felt hollow, empty, lost. After the show, back in his dressing room, something happened. Louis sat in front of his mirror, still in his stage clothes. He looked at his reflection, at the man who'd just made 2,000 people ecstatically happy. And he didn't recognize himself. The face looking back seemed like a stranger, a performer, a mask. But where was Louis? Where was the boy from New Orleans who'd fallen in love with music? Where was the young man who'd played his heart out in Chicago clubs? Where had he gone? Louis stood up to leave, and collapsed, just fell, like his legs had stopped working. Lucille screamed. Band members rushed in. An ambulance was called. Louis was conscious but couldn't speak, couldn't move, just stared ahead with empty eyes. He was rushed to Cedars of Lebanon Hospital in Los Angeles. The doctors ran every test imaginable, EKG, X-rays, blood work. Everything came back normal. Physically, Louis Armstrong was fine, but he remained unresponsive. He could hear. His eyes would track movement, but he didn't speak, didn't react, didn't engage. The doctors were baffled. Dr. Harrison, the lead physician, held a conference with his team on October 22nd. "Gentlemen, I've never seen anything like this. Mr. Armstrong shows no signs of stroke, no neurological damage, no infection, no physical ailment of any kind, yet he's completely withdrawn. It's as if he's chosen to disconnect from the world." One of the younger doctors suggested, "Could it be psychological?" Dr. Harrison frowned. "We've had psychiatrists examine him. They can't reach him either. He's not catatonic in the traditional sense. He's just absent." As the days passed, Louis's condition didn't improve. He lay in his hospital bed, eyes open but unseeing. Lucille sat with him constantly. She talked about their life together, about New Orleans, about music, about everything that had ever made Louis happy. Nothing worked. The news spread through the entertainment world. Louis Armstrong was in the hospital, in some kind of mysterious condition. No one knew what was wrong. Newspaper articles appeared. Jazz legends' mystery illness baffles doctors. Fellow musicians sent flowers. Frank Sinatra called the hospital daily. Duke Ellington visited. Ella Fitzgerald came and sang softly by Louis's bedside. Louis showed no response to any of it. By the end of October, 20 doctors had examined Louis Armstrong. Specialists in every field. They held meetings, debated, theorized, but couldn't agree on a diagnosis. Some said extreme exhaustion. Others suggested a rare neurological condition. A few wondered if it might be early onset dementia. But nothing fit completely. Dr. Harrison confessed to Lucille, "Mrs. Armstrong, I'm sorry. We've done everything we know how to do. Medically, your husband is healthy, but something is keeping him locked inside himself." "And we can't figure out what," Lucille cried. "Will he come back?" Dr. Harrison couldn't answer. In Hollywood, word reached Dean Martin. Dean and Louis weren't best friends. They moved in different circles. Dean with the Rat Pack, Louis in the jazz world, but they'd crossed paths many times over the years. Vegas shows, charity events, Hollywood parties. And Dean had always admired Louis, not just his music, his spirit, his kindness. Every time Dean met Louis, he left feeling happier. That was Louis's gift. He made people feel good. When Dean heard that Louis was in some kind of unreachable state, something bothered him, something the doctors were missing. Dean remembered a conversation from 2 years earlier, 1957, a benefit concert in New York. Dean and Louis were backstage. Louis seemed tired. Dean asked, "Hey, Pops, you ever just want to stop? Take a break from all this?" Louis had looked at Dean with those expressive eyes and said, "Dean, the day I stop making music is the day I stop breathing. Music isn't what I do, it's who I am. Without it, I'm nothing." Dean remembered those words, and he understood something the doctors didn't. Louis Armstrong wasn't sick. He'd lost himself, lost his connection to the thing that made him Louis, and medicine couldn't fix that, only music could. Have you ever felt disconnected from something you love? How did you find your way back? Share your experience in the comments. November 3rd, 1959. Dean Martin drove to Cedars of Lebanon Hospital. He didn't call ahead, didn't ask permission, just went. At the reception desk, the nurse recognized him immediately. "Mr. Martin, can I help you?" Dean smiled that easy, charming smile. "I'm here to see Louis Armstrong." The nurse's face fell. "I'm sorry, Mr. Martin. Mr. Armstrong isn't receiving visitors. Only immediate family." Dean leaned on the counters. "Hey, sweetheart, I am family. Now, which room?" Something in Dean's tone made the nurse reconsider. She checked her clipboard. "Room 427, but please, the doctor said no excitement. He's very fragile." Dean nodded and headed for the elevator. He rode up to the 4th floor, walked down the corridor, and found room 427. Outside the door, he paused, took a breath, then entered. The room was dim, curtains drawn, one lamp providing soft light. Louis lay in the bed, propped up on pillows. His eyes were open but staring at nothing. Lucille sat in a chair beside the bed, holding his hand. She looked up when Dean entered, surprise crossing her face. "Dean Martin?" Dean nodded. "Hey, Lucille, I heard Louis wasn't feeling well. Thought I'd stop by." Lucille stood, wiping tears. "That's kind of you, but Dean, he's not here. He doesn't respond to anything." Dean looked at Louis, really looked at him, and he saw what the doctors couldn't see. Louis Armstrong's body was present, but Louis Armstrong, the soul, the spirit, the joy, was gone. Dean pulled a chair next to the bed, sat down. "Mind if I stay a while?" Lucille shook her head. "Of course not." Dean sat there for 10 minutes, just sitting, looking at Louis, thinking. Then he spoke, not to Lucille, to Louis. "Hey, Pops, it's Dean. Dean Martin. Remember me? We worked that benefit together in '57. You played When the Saints Go Marching In and the whole place went crazy." No response from Louis. His eyes didn't move. Dean continued. "You know, Louis, I've been thinking about something you told me once. You said music isn't what you do, it's who you are. That stuck with me. Because I feel the same way about singing. It's not a job. It's not a performance. It's how I express what's inside." Still no response. Dean looked at Lucille. "Do the doctors know what's wrong?" Lucille shook her head. "They've tested everything. 20 different doctors. Nobody can explain it. He's just gone somewhere." Dean nodded, slowly. "I think I know where he went." Lucille leaned forward. "Where?" Dean looked at Louis. "He went to the place people go when they lose themselves. When they can't remember why they do what they do. When the joy becomes obligation. I've been there. It's a dark place." Lucille started crying. "How do we bring him back?" Dean stood up. "We remind him who he is." Dean walked to the window, opened the curtains. Late afternoon Los Angeles sunlight flooded the room. Then Dean did something unexpected. He began to sing, softly at first, "When the Saints Go Marching In." No accompaniment, no microphone, just Dean Martin's voice, filling that hospital room. Lucille watched, hope and skepticism warring on her face. Dean sang the first verse. Louis didn't move, didn't react. Dean sang the second verse. Still nothing. By the third verse, Dean's voice grew stronger, more passionate. He wasn't just singing. He was calling out to Louis, trying to reach through whatever barrier separated Louis from the world. When Dean finished, the room fell silent. Louis hadn't moved, hadn't blinked, hadn't shown any sign he'd heard. Dean looked at Lucille. What was Louis's favorite song? The one he loved most? Lucille thought. He always loved "What a Wonderful World." Even though he wouldn't record it for another few years, he'd sing it sometimes, at home, when he was happy. Dean sat back down. Then that's what we'll sing. Please subscribe to our channel if this story is moving you. What happens next is the moment that changed everything, when music proved more powerful than medicine. Dean began singing "What a Wonderful World" Nando Barbian. His voice was tender, emotional, every word carefully delivered. "I see trees of green, red roses, too. I see them bloom for me and you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world." As Dean sang, something changed in the room. The air felt different, charged somehow. Lucille felt it. She looked at Louis. His eyes, which had been staring at nothing, moved slightly. Just a small movement, but movement. Dean continued, "I see skies of blue and clouds of white, the bright blessed day, the dark sacred night, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world." Louis's hand twitched. Lucille gasped. Dean saw it too, but kept singing. "The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky. are also on the faces of people going by. And then something miraculous happened. Lewis's lips moved. No sound came out. But they moved, forming words. Dean sang louder, encouraging. I see friends shaking hands, saying, "How do you do?" They're really saying, "I love you." A sound emerged from Louis's throat, barely audible, scratchy, but definitely a sound. He was trying to sing. Dean's eyes filled with tears, but he kept going. I hear babies cry. I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than I'll ever know. Lewis's voice, weak as a whisper, joined in. And I think to myself. Dean sang with him, their voices blending. What a wonderful world. By the end of the Aos Dios song, Lewis was singing audibly. His voice was rough, damaged from disuse, but it was there. He was there. When the song ended, Lewis's eyes focused, really focused, for the first time in 2 weeks. He looked at Dean. Recognition dawned on his face. Dean? His voice was barely a croak. Dean laughed through tears. Hey, Pops, welcome back. Lucille rushed to Louis's side. Louis! Oh, Louis! Lewis looked at his wife, tears streaming down his face. Lucille, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry! Dr. Harrison rushed into the room, alerted by nurses who'd heard singing. He stopped short when he saw Louis, awake, alert, responsive. Mr. Armstrong, you're back! Lewis looked at the doctor, confused. Back! Where was I? Dr. Harrison had no answer, but Dean did. You were lost, Pops, in a place where the music couldn't reach you, but we found you. Over the next hour, as doctors examined a now fully responsive Louis Armstrong, the story emerged. Lewis explained haltingly what he'd experienced. It was like being underwater. I could see everything, hear everything, but it was muffled, distant, like I was watching my life from far away. I couldn't find the energy to come back, didn't see the point, until I heard music, Dean's voice, singing. And something in me remembered. This is who I am. This is why I'm here. The doctors were astounded. 20 specialists, millions of dollars in tests, weeks of treatment. And what brought Lewis back was a song. Dr. Harrison later told colleagues, we treated the body. We forgot to treat the soul. Music was his medicine. We should have known. Louis spent 3 more days in the hospital for observation, but he was fully himself again, laughing, joking, already planning his return to performing. Dean visited every day. They'd sit and talk about music, about life, about the strange experience Louis had gone through. It was like depression, Louis said, but deeper. I'd lost connection with the thing that made me me. Without music, I didn't know how to exist. Dean understood. That's why I came, Pops. I remembered what you told me about music being who you are. I figured if the doctors couldn't reach you, maybe music could. Louis looked at Dean with such gratitude. You saved my life, Dean, not my body, my soul. I'll never forget that. When news broke that Louis Armstrong had recovered and that Dean Martin had been involved, reporters swarmed. They wanted the story, the dramatic details, but both Louis and Dean downplayed it. Louis told one reporter, I had a bad spell. Dean came to visit. We sang together, that's all. But those who knew who'd been there understood the deeper truth. Dean Martin had diagnosed what 20 doctors couldn't. He'd seen that Louis Armstrong didn't need medicine. He needed music. He needed to be reminded of who he was. In the years that followed, Louis and Dean remained close, not best friends who talked daily, but connected, bonded by that experience. Whenever they crossed paths, at Vegas shows or Hollywood events, they'd share a look, a nod, an acknowledgement of what had happened in that hospital room. In 1968, when Louis really did suffer serious heart problems, Dean called immediately. Pops, you need anything? Louis laughed weakly. Just your singing, Dean. That worked last time. Dean sent a recording, his voice singing all of Louis's favorite songs. Louis played it constantly during his recovery, said it gave him strength. When Louis passed away in 1971, Dean Martin was devastated. He attended the funeral, stood among thousands of mourners, and later, in private, Dean recorded a tribute album. Songs Louis had loved, songs they'd sung together, the album was never released commercially. Dean made it for himself, to remember, to honor, to say thank you to the man who taught him that music wasn't entertainment. It was life itself. Years later, in a rare interview about that hospital incident, Dean was asked, how did you know music would work when medicine didn't? Dean thought for a moment. Because I knew Louis. The doctors knew his body, but I knew his soul, and his soul was music. You can't separate them. Take away Louis's music and you take away Louis. I just helped him find his way back. The medical community studied Louis Armstrong's case for years. They coined a term for it: creative disconnect syndrome. When an artist loses connection with their art, it can manifest as physical symptoms: depression, unresponsiveness, a shutting down of the system. The treatment: reconnection with the art, with the thing that makes them who they are. Dr. Harrison, who treated Louis, wrote a paper about the case. We must remember that human beings are not just biological machines. We have souls, spirits, connections to things that give our lives meaning. Sometimes the most sophisticated medicine is understanding what feeds a person's soul. Louis Armstrong's mysterious hospitalization in 1959 became legendary in music circles, not for the medical mystery, but for what it revealed about the power of music, about friendship, about understanding what truly heals. Musicians told the story to younger artists. Remember Louis Armstrong and Dean Martin. Remember that your art isn't separate from you. It's you. Take care of it. Nurture it. Because without it, you might lose yourself. Louis himself reflected on the experience in later years. In a 1967 interview, he said, "That time in the hospital taught me something. I'd been treating music like a job, going through the motions, but music isn't what I do for a living, it's how I live. Dean Martin reminded me of that. He gave me back to myself." The interviewer asked, "What did it feel like, being in that state?" Louis thought carefully. "It was like being in a fog. Everything was gray, muffled. I could see people trying to reach me, but I couldn't find the way back. Then I heard Dean singing, and it was like a light in the fog. I followed the music home." Today, the story of Louis Armstrong's mysterious hospital stay is often overlooked in histories of his life, overshadowed by his musical achievements, his civil rights activism, his legendary performances. But those who know the story understand its significance. It revealed something essential about Louis Armstrong. He wasn't just a musician who played jazz, he was jazz. The music lived in him, flowed through him, was inseparable from his existence, and it revealed something about Dean Martin, too. Behind the smooth entertainer persona, behind the jokes and the drinks and the Vegas glamour, was a man who understood the power of connection. Who knew that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is recognizing who they truly are and reminding them of it? November 3rd, 1959, a hospital room in Los Angeles. 20 doctors had failed to reach Louis Armstrong, but one singer, one friend, one voice succeeded. Not because Dean Martin was medically trained, but because he understood what the doctors didn't. Louis Armstrong wasn't dying of a disease. He was dying of disconnection from himself, from his purpose, from his music. And the cure wasn't in a prescription. It was in a song. That afternoon, when Dean walked out of Cedars of Lebanon Hospital, he didn't tell anyone what had happened, didn't call reporters, didn't brag about saving Louis Armstrong's life. He just got in his car, drove home, and felt grateful. Grateful that he'd been able to help, grateful for the friendship, grateful for music, which had once again proven itself more powerful than anyone could fully understand. Years later, medical students studying the Armstrong case ask, how is it possible that singing could wake someone from an unresponsive state? The answer isn't simple, because science can measure brain waves and hormones and neurological responses, but science can't fully measure soul, can't quantify what it means when someone loses themselves and then finds their way back, can't explain the mysterious alchemy that happens when the right music meets the right person at the right time. Louis Armstrong knew, Dean Martin knew, and everyone who witnessed what happened in that hospital room knew. Music isn't sound waves and frequencies. It's not entertainment or performance. Music is connection. To ourselves, to others, to something larger than us. And when we lose that connection, we lose ourselves. But we can find our way back. Sometimes with medicine, sometimes with therapy, and sometimes, as Louis Armstrong discovered, with a friend who knows exactly which song to sing. The sun set over Los Angeles on November 3rd, 1959, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. In room 427 at Cedars of Lebanon Hospital, Louis Armstrong sat up in bed, eating solid food for the first time in weeks. Lucille sat beside him laughing at something he'd said, and Dean Martin, who'd quietly slipped out while doctors examined Louis, drove through the city streets with the windows down. The radio played, a jazz station, and coincidentally, impossibly, or perhaps perfectly, Louis Armstrong's trumpet filled the car. Playing When the Saints Go Marching In, Dean smiled, turned up the volume, and sang along. Because that's what you do when you understand the magic of music, when you've witnessed its power to heal, to restore, to bring someone back from the edge of losing themselves completely. You celebrate it, honor it, add your voice to it, and you remember. That medicine is important, science is vital, doctors save lives every single day, but sometimes, just sometimes, what a person needs most isn't medicine, it's music, it's connection, it's a friend who sees past the symptoms to the soul and knows exactly how to reach it. That's the gift Dean Martin gave Louis Armstrong. That's the lesson of that November afternoon. That's the story that should be remembered, not as a medical mystery, but as a reminder of what we are, of what matters, of how we save each other, not with pills or procedures, but with presence, with understanding, with the courage to sing to someone who can't sing back, until, miraculously, they can, and they do, and the music plays on forever.